Well done, Baku. Well done. So, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix happened last night, and what an absolute classic it was. Battles, carnage, teammate collision. Let's talk about this crazy race. So, it was Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton on the front row for this race, and down into the first corner, not much happened in the first corner, but it was the second corner on the first lap where the majority of the carnage started. The two Williams were down the inside of one of the Renaults, I think, and down to turn 3 there was contact. The biggest contact was between Alonso, Sirotkin and Hulkenberg. It gave Alonso 2 punches. He then had to drive the majority of the lap on 2 wheels. It was quite remarkable, really. Sirotkin was out of the race on the spot, and Hulkenberg got away with it. So that was the main contact, and there was also a bit behind with Ericsson going into the side of Magnussen, and then turn 3, a little bit further up the straight, Ocon and Raikkonen had a collision which put Ocon out of the race. Now, Ocon was pretty keen to blame Raikkonen. I would not do that. I believe that this incident was Esteban Ocon's fault. Raikkonen was a significant way down the inside, and Ocon basically turned down on him into the 90-degree left-hander and probably screwed himself out of a really good result considering how the rest of this race went. So, all the debris on the track brought out a very early safety car, and I actually enjoyed, one of the most enjoyable things I found about this race was actually when the safety car lights went out after that first safety car, and Sebastian Vettel backed the field up for half of the Baku front straight. So you basically had Vettel warming up his tyres, and everyone else behind just tense, waiting for him to floor the throttle. I thought the gamesmanship and the sort of psychological battle there was pretty cool. But as soon as the race got underway, the battle at the front kind of dissipated. Vettel pulled out a 3-second gap on Hamilton, who basically had a 3-second gap on Bottas behind, and Vettel and Hamilton seemed to trade faster slaps for the majority of that sort of first stint until Lewis Hamilton had a double lockup on his front tyres coming into the first turn, and this looked like it had put paid to any chance of victory he might have had, because then he had to come into the pits due to the vibrations and the flat stop, and we saw the undercut was not particularly effective around Baku at all. The drivers seemed to really struggle to get the tyres up to temperature, particularly the Red Bulls, who I'll get to. So Hamilton looked like he'd written himself out of contention. He dropped back behind his teammate and Sebastian Vettel, who kept going, and behind them was the battle between the 2 Red Bulls. Now, one of the other cool things about this race was seeing the Renaults immediately after the safety car restart actually taking it to the Red Bulls proper. The Renaults were on the ultra soft tyre compared to the harder super softs on the Red Bulls, and both of the Red Bull guys were complaining about their batteries not charging, or the batteries deploying down the straight when they were trying to charge, and they couldn't get the tyres up to temperature. So those things combined meant that they were really struggling, and Carlos Sainz in particular was really feisty against Verstappen. He actually pulled quite a few seconds up the road at one point until the ultra soft started to degrade and he came into the pits. Nico Hulkenberg also pulled a really good move on Daniel Ricciardo, but then he later at turn 4 just lost the back end heading into the corner, damaged the back left suspension and put himself out of contention. The second year in a row for Nico Hulkenberg that he's had a sort of almost amateur sort of mistake like that that's put him out of a potential podium position, and thus a podium still eludes Nico Hulkenberg somehow. But that was a real highlight of the race, and as we saw, the Red Bulls would continue to battle throughout the race, and I'll get to that now. So by sort of lap 40, Sebastian Vettel had pitted, Valtteri Bottas had not. Sebastian Vettel had come in and put the soft tyres on his car to sort of, he pitted about lap 31, so he probably could have got away with putting the ultra softs, but they were covering Hamilton, so they went conservative because they thought the win was in the bag. This was probably, despite the end result, one of Vettel's most dominant races in a Ferrari, probably the most dominant one. So Mercedes left Valtteri Bottas out way longer than Vettel in the hope that a safety car would arise, and Red Bull were doing the same thing, but I don't imagine they thought they would be the ones to bring out the safety car. Now, the crash between Verstappen and Vettel, let's talk about that. It's a really tough one to call. I think you'd have to sort of, if you were going to split it, probably you'd say 70% Verstappen's fault, 30% Ricciardo's. These two were battling all race. There had already been light contact on a couple of occasions before this, but this time on lap 40, heading onto the main straight, Daniel Ricciardo was in the slipstream. He pulled to the right, Verstappen went to covered, and then he dummied him, went to the left, and Verstappen pulled over to the left. The lack of downforce resulted in a lock-up for Ricciardo, went straight up the back of Verstappen into turn one, and that was a DNF for both Red Bulls immediately. And I think the general consensus, including from the two drivers themselves, who were extremely apologetic after the race, is that it just shouldn't have happened. It was completely unnecessary. I know the Verstappen rule, as they called it towards the end of 2016, where he would pull to the right to cover someone, and then they would go down the inside, and he would block them off again, thereby moving twice, and that being against the rules. That rule was lifted for this year, but the fact is, when someone's committed, like Daniel Ricciardo had, he was late on the brakes. He had committed to potentially a move. You just can't move in front of them, otherwise you're going to cause a collision. I know it's not technically illegal, but when you're racing someone, and especially when it's your teammate, you've got to leave them space. And I don't think Verstappen left. He should have pulled to the right and let Ricciardo down the inside. The chances are he might have overcooked it anyway, and Verstappen could have got a switchback. But certainly, I think while it's for the most part Verstappen's fault, their whole race was just Red Bull. It was great to watch. It was great to watch them racing, but it was a silly and unnecessary incident from both drivers. So this brought out a safety car, obviously, and this led to pretty much everyone in the field coming in to put on the Ultrasofts for a last lap dash, and this meant Valtteri Bottas, who was leading going into the safety car, he effectively got a free pit stop. Vettel had already made a stop and was therefore still behind Bottas. So Bottas emerged in the lead from Vettel, Hamilton, and Kimi Raikkonen, who pitted on lap 1 after the contact with Ocon. He was back up into 4th place. Perez behind, and behind them was Romain Grosjean heading into the safety car, but then he dropped it all on his own. Well, he did drop it all on his own, but we got one of the funnier radio clips of the race when immediately after the incident, Grosjean claimed that Ericsson had hit him, which I'm almost lost for words, because it's almost as if Grosjean didn't want to accept that he had made such a rookie error, and he therefore instantly put the blame on Ericsson. That has, of course, resulted in comments and Twitter lighting up with claims that Ericsson took out the Red Bulls, and it's resulted in quite a lot of humour, but a pretty basic mistake from Grosjean, really, to drop it under the safety car like that, and it cost the Haas team points in the end. A lot of teams scored points today, but Haas in the end was not one of them. So away from the safety car, it was Bottas in front of Vettel, and it was so close heading down into turn 1. Seeing the two Mercedes and the two Ferraris that close heading into turn 1 was quite a spectacle, and Vettel from P2 dived down the inside of Valtteri Bottas. He took some wisdom from his old teammate Daniel Ricciardo, and he sent it down the inside, but it was an unsuccessful move. He locked the front left brake, and he went quite wide on the exit of turn 1, and it cost him spots to Hamilton and his teammate, and it looked like Valtteri Bottas was going to take quite a comfortable win and lead Mercedes to a 1-2, but then on the main straight, Bottas ran over a piece of debris and punctured his rear right tyre, I want to say, and in the end he didn't finish the race. And what a shame for Bottas. I mean, after the criticism he received in Bahrain for not sending it down the inside of Sebastian Vettel on the last lap. He drove a faultless race in China, lost the win through no fault of his own, and now he's lost Baku through no fault of his own. And there's shots of him, obviously, at the side of the track, quite heartbroken. This was definitely a win that he deserved. He deserved the win in China, but he deserved this one even more. And he would have been leading the championship had he won this race. So extremely unfortunate for Bottas. A bit weird that that piece of debris was not cleaned up during the safety car. And I find it a bit weird that Bottas didn't see it, but I guess it was quite small. And when you're doing that speed, you're probably not going to see something like that. But this put his teammate Lewis Hamilton in the lead for the final 2 laps, and he ultimately took probably the luckiest win of his career. He basically Stephen Bradbury'd it, stayed out the way, and let the chaos unfold in front of him, and he took his first win in Baku and the championship lead with it. And Lewis Hamilton to be leading the championship after the last 2 races he's had where he's been off the pace of not just Vettel, but probably his teammate, and he'll be counting his lucky stars that he's had the results in the last 2 races, because he's been off the pace. There's still a lot of work to do for him, and I think he knows that. He was sort of quite, not apologetic, but he knew after the race that it was his teammates, and yeah, lucky Lewis today. Now, there seems to be 2 rules for a crazy race in Formula 1. Either Daniel Ricciardo wins the race, or Sergio Perez gets a podium. Now, this was Perez's 8th podium in F1 for Force India. He drove a pretty faultless race. He was 5th after the safety car restart, and he was able to get past Vettel with the power of that Mercedes engine after he made his mistake. And when Bottas retired, this eventually became 3rd, and considering the pretty average start to the year that Force India have had, this was a major boost for them. As I said, Perez becomes the most successful Mexican driver in the history of Formula 1. His 8th in his career, and vaults Force India from 9th to 6th in the Constructors. And this was certainly a fantastic result for them and a pretty faultless drive. Perez seems to be pretty adept at taking podiums in these more crazy races, as I said. Like, it's either Ricciardo wins or Perez gets on the podium, and that happened today. And there's actually quite a few drivers worth mentioning behind him. It was Carlos Sainz in 5th place, who reaped the rewards of his aggressiveness early on, but the driver of the day in 6th place, Charles Leclerc for the Sauber team. Now, Ericsson took their first points of the year back in Bahrain, but this was an outstanding drive for Leclerc. He made Q2 for the first time in his career, and he drove an absolutely perfect race. He ringed the hell out of that Sauber. He passed Lance Stroll. He passed Lance Stroll. He with the Mercedes engine compared to the Ferrari, he passed him fair and square. And for him to get a 6th place in that Sauber really underlies the potential that we all knew Charles Leclerc had. He dominated the F2 championship last year, and he's had a bit of a rocky start to the season, but he looked very comfortable out there yesterday, and I wouldn't rule him out of a Ferrari seat next year, that's for sure. And looking further down the top 10, it was Fernando Alonso in 7th place, taking his, I think, 3rd, 7th place for the year or something like that. And considering that car was on 2 wheels after lap 1, for him to end up 7th is just unbelievable, and it shows that Alonso, we all know he should be fighting for championships. He should have been fighting for championships the last 4 years, but a fantastic drive from Fernando. In 8th place, who was in 8th place? Lance Stroll. He was in 8th place. He took Williams' first points of the year, which was a good effort. I don't know if it's really down to improvements in the car, but rather the fact that the engine is so important around Baku, and the Mercedes, whilst Ferrari close, Mercedes is still the best engine on the grid. So good drive from him. Stoffel Van Dorn in 9th, and Brendan Hartley rounding out the top 10, taking the first points of his F1 career, and the first for my Kiwi cousins since, I think it was 42 years. So good race from him. And I think that's pretty much my wrap-up of Baku. A lot of controversy with the Red Bulls. Sadness for Bottas. A surprising win for Lewis Hamilton. Not very often he has a surprising win. And all I know is that I am loving F1 2018 so far. It has been 3 out of 4 races have been classics, and we haven't had that in the hybrid era. This championship is on. I will be covering the rest of the season. I'm very keen to see how it turns out. And until the next round in Spain, I will catch you later.